of a joint meeting of the Traffic and Parking Committee and the Budget and Finance Committee. I'm your chair for the Traffic and Parking Committee, Frank Harrison, and I will be presiding over our meeting tonight. This meeting is requested by the Uber and Lyft to inform us of a pending bill that is BL 2014-952. Pardon me. Yeah. Also requested by Billy Fields and the Traffic and Park License and Transportation Commission. And this will be purely an informative meeting. We will hear from representatives from both entities informing us, and then there will be an opportunity to ask questions. So I guess at this time, we will go ahead and take the presentation. Billy, do you have anything that you want to say before you start the presentation?
Thank you, Chairman. We appreciate anything that's our council.
Hold on, Billy.
Right there in front. Right there in front of you. Right there.
Right here?
No, right here. Right in front of you. Above you. Above your name, Vice Mayor.
Okay.
Right there.
All right. Yeah, you should be on now.
Councilman, thank you for letting me be here tonight. We appreciate the opportunity. Members of council, thank you. We know it's a cold night and there's a ball game, so I'm going to be brief. Teresa Costonis from Metro Legal is here. She and I and others have worked on this particular piece of legislation for months. When we found out that there was a new technology coming to Nashville, we certainly wanted to look at it and see if it made sense. We also wanted to make sure that it would protect public safety. So for the last several months, we've had dozens of meetings with everybody on all sides of the issue to try to come together with an ordinance that we could feel good about. What we've got, what you will have on first reading tomorrow night is a bill that basically takes the livery services and creates a new description of a transportation network company. What that will mean is a company that is basically a digital company that's dispatching through internet technologies. They will all be treated, everything in the livery service will generally be treated the same in terms of the ways we do the business. There are going to be separate issues related to insurance and some other things, but we think what we've done is put together a bill that addresses public safety. I could go on and go through the nuances of it, but the bottom line is what we think we've done is looked at the way it is and the way it could be and made some changes for everyone on the livery side and generally treat everybody fairly and feel good about what we've got. So I can go on for a long time because we know lots about this now, but I'd really rather just respond to questions and be prepared to help you along those lines.
Okay. Before we go into the question and answer period, are there any representatives who are prepared, Mr. Fields, to make a presentation?
Yes, both Uber and Lyft have representatives here, and they're prepared to make presentations and/or answer questions for you.
Okay. Also, I might add, before they make those presentations, that they do have some fact sheets that they're passing out. I don't know how many they have or if they have enough for everybody, but I've been told that in the event that they don't have enough, we'll be able to have some more by tomorrow at the council meeting. So at this time, anyone who wants to go ahead and start the presentation can take the podium.
Good evening. My name is Megan Joyce, and I'm a general manager for Uber's East Coast business. I do have a few handouts here. Would it be helpful to have those in hand as I'm talking? Yeah? Great.
You might want to pull that mic up so we could hear you, please.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Great. I'll go ahead and get started as these handouts are being distributed because I know it is late and I want to make sure everyone gets out of here as quickly as possible for the big game tonight. But thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us this evening. And we're very eager to answer any questions that you might have about Uber or my colleagues from Lyft or the ride-sharing business in general. I'll take a step back and talk about Uber, which is a technology company. We make a software that brings together two groups of people. One are people who are looking for a safe, reliable ride, and the other is our local transportation providers and small businesses who are looking for an easy method of lead generation. This software matches together people who are requesting a ride with the closest available local transportation provider, and everyone wins. Riders get safe, reliable access to transportation, and local transportation businesses get a way to support and grow their burgeoning small businesses. I want to take a moment to talk through the extensive safety procedures that we go through with respect to this business. So Uber doesn't own any cars or employ any drivers, but rather we partner with local transportation providers on the ground here in Nashville. But before they're even able to access our software, we require all applicants to go through the strictest background checks in the industry. This includes full multi-state, federal, and county background checks that goes back 7 years, the maximum required under the Federal Fair Credit Reporting Act. In addition, they need to come back with a clean bill of health on that background check, zero tolerance policy for any drug, alcohol, or sexual offense before they're even able to access the software. If and when they've passed that background check, that driver is then given a secure app through which they source these rides. Both rider and driver are given full information about the person that they're going to be in the car with. When a rider requests, they're shown the driver's picture, make, model of the vehicle, the license plate number, the driver's picture, so they know exactly who they're getting in the car with. And likewise, the driver is given full information as well. All money is exchanged electronically, so drivers don't have to drive around with a huge amount of cash in their vehicles, which adds to the safety of the experience for the transportation providers. And after every ride, both the riders and the drivers rate their experience on a series of 1 to 5 stars and are invited to give open-ended feedback so that our customer service reps who are standing by 24 hours a day can take this data and ensure that it really is only the safest, most reliable transportation providers in the area that are using the software, and that drivers are kept safe as well, so that all riders are respecting the experience just as much as they are. Finally, every single ride that is requested on the Uber platform is insured with at least $1 million in commercial liability insurance. You'll see on those handouts a 3-part diagram showing exactly what levels of insurance apply during each step of the trip. A lot of the drivers who are using Uber and Lyft's apps for lead generation are personal, private citizens. And so when their app is not on, they're not engaging in commercial activity, and their standard Tennessee auto insurance applies. However, when they do turn on the app, we assume that they are willing to engage in commercial activity, and that's when, in the case of our ride-sharing partners, that's when Uber's umbrella policy would begin to apply. And so even before they receive a request for a ride, they fall under our personal auto insurance and contingent liability coverage of $50,000 per person, $100,000 per incident, and $25,000 for property damage. And once they get a request for a ride, they're covered with $1 million in commercial liability insurance, $1 million in uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage, and contingent collision and comprehensive coverage. This is many times what is currently offered from Nashville taxis, and you can see the insurance comparison on this diagram, which you also have, going through step by step each level of insurance, how that compares for any ride that you request on Uber or frankly Lyft's apps versus what you would be getting in a standard Nashville taxi. It is our highest priority to ensure that the people who use our software, both riders and also the local transportation providers, are kept safe and sound at all times using our software. And we take every step possible to ensure that that's the case. I would be thrilled to answer any questions that you might have about the ride-sharing industry or the proposed regulations, and again, I'm very grateful for your time this evening.
Let me ask, are there any more presentations that are going to be made
Yes, my colleague from Lyft.
Okay, let's hear from him, and then we will take those questions and answers.
Beautiful, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Opaku, and I am the Director of Public Policy for Lyft. It is my pleasure to be here before all of you and to give a brief overview of how Lyft works and also to answer any questions that you may have. My counterpart from Uber did mention a lot of things that actually do apply to Lyft, so I'm going to try to focus on some differences, particularly in terms of how Lyft got started as a company. Lyft was founded on a statistic that shows that on any given day, 80% of the seats in cars go unused. This is a very fancy way of saying that when we drive, we tend to drive alone. And the creators of Lyft, the co-founders of Lyft, were trying to find a way to see if they could maximize that. In other words, to try to find a way to mainstream the idea of carpooling and making it feel much more safe and creating an incentive to allow people to ride with other members of their community who were the safest and most respectful drivers out there. So what they did was they created the Lyft app. The onboarding process to become a Lyft driver is very similar to what my counterpart at Uber just described. There is a very comprehensive criminal background check that also checks the national criminal databases, the federal criminal databases, a county-by-county search, and also the national sex offender database. And assuming that a person comes back with a clean record, there's also a very comprehensive driving check to make sure that the person does not have any significant infractions on their driving history. Then and only then they are allowed to become a Lyft driver. The Lyft process works very similar to Uber, that the ride is requested only through the app, so there is no exchange of money during a Lyft ride. The passenger is able to see a picture of the Lyft driver on their app, a picture of the Lyft vehicle on their app, and the license plate of the vehicle, so they know exactly who's going to come pick them up. All the rides are GPS tracked, so you know where the driver is taking you. There's a record of where the driver is taking you, and after the ride is over, you are emailed with a receipt with the amount of the fare, the name of your driver, when you were picked up, where you were picked up, and also a link to contact Lyft or if there are any sort of concerns that you need to report. Similar to Uber, there's also an immediate rating system, which we believe creates enhanced accountability and transparency with regards to the Lyft ride. As soon as the ride is over, you are prompted to rate your driver on a scale of 1 to 5 stars. Now, if you give 5 stars, that means it was a great ride. There's nothing to cause any sort of concern. But if you give anything less than 4 stars, it's automatically going to prompt you to ask for more information to see if there's something that we need to respond to immediately. And unlike other traditional forms of ground transportation, with the Lyft platform and with the Uber platform, all it literally takes is a push of a button to disable a driver's access if there's something that we need to look into. So there's much more immediate response, there's much more enhanced transparency and accountability with the Lyft ride. Lyft has been here in Nashville for going on a year now, and it's been really one of our most successful cities. Lyft is providing enhanced transportation options for a city that's clearly growing and that continues to grow. It's creating a lot more economic opportunities for people in Nashville who might be in need of them. It is, I think, helping cement Nashville's status as a very tech-friendly city. And in that regard, I would like to point out that Nashville was the very first city to come to an official agreement to have ride-sharing operations at its airport. That didn't even happen in San Francisco. So it's been our great pleasure to be here in Nashville. We look forward to continuing a wonderful, beneficial relationship, and I am here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Billy wants to be recognized again. Go ahead.
I would like to share just a couple of more things to make sure that I've given you an overview from our standpoint. One of the things, there are a couple of things that are going to be different in what we're proposing. One of the things we'll be doing with all of the companies, this legislation will apply not only to the TNCs, but it'll apply to all the livery services. We'll be asking the companies to provide, to do more of the background check work. They'll be doing more of the inspection process. What the commission staff and what the police will be doing are spot checks and random checks. We think it makes a lot of sense to go in that direction. We'll also be be changing the age of vehicles. We'll allow any vehicle in the livery service to be up to 10 years old and less than 350,000 miles. As long as they pass the inspection, we're going to allow them to be on it. Currently, we do not let vehicles over 7 years old come into service. We also, in the provisions that will allow us to take unique vehicles and special vehicles and have them an opportunity to be on the street even though they're past the age limits. Again, there's some small nuances where we've certainly looked for ways to meet the public safety in every step. And that's been the thing that we've used, that's been the filter that we've used continuously, is to make sure public safety continue to be protected. So, thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we could take the questions from the council. And I see that we have several. We'll start with Councilman Claiborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Fields for being here. 2 or 3 different questions for the gentleman that talked to us last there from Lyft. He didn't address the insurance issues that the lady from Uber did. I think it would be good if he could provide us with the similar information that Uber gave, so that we could see apples to apples comparison tomorrow night. On vehicle inspections, there's nothing on the Uber fact sheet here that addresses vehicle inspections, and I noticed that you said that you were putting that mainly on these companies as well as the livery services, and I was just wondering to the extent that those inspections will take place and what kind of documentation or reporting will be, especially since you're loosening up the age limit on vehicles and going from 7 years to 10 years and up to 300,000 miles. That's cars that old, there's lots of inspection possibilities there.
All of the vehicles will have to pass what's already in the order, what it will be in your ordinance, talking about the various things that have to be checked. They'll be done by a mechanic that is trained to know what to look for. What we do at the commission now, we do the cosmetic inspections, the basic inspections of looking for titles, make sure the VINs and all that match up, but we still require mechanical inspection to come in, so there's really no change in that, other than instead of us doing the cosmetic inspections on the front end, we're going to be pushing that back to all the livery services, including the TNCs, to tell us that what we would do is be randomly and spot checking.
Okay, so the mechanical inspection then is the same as it currently is for livery and taxi?
More or less, yes. The taxi cabs is a little bit different. They're less stringent. The livery services actually currently go through a more stringent process than taxi cabs.
Okay, and I'd like to ask about the airport fee. I know currently cabs and limos have a device on the vehicle that triggers a count. So how does that work with Uber and Lyft? Do they provide this? Does that driver have to obtain one of this? How does that work?
I was not involved in direct negotiations with that because it is at the airport. I could give you general ideas. It may be that either Uber or Lyft could give you more precise answers.
If we could get them to come to the...
Sure. Well, first of all, with respect to your first question, we will have packets for every council member that contains not only the insurance information, but just much more detailed information about Lyft and its operations. But for the purpose of tonight, our insurance operates in a very substantially similar way as Megan from Uber described the Uber insurance working. As for the airport deal, and I want to double check this because I was not directly involved in those negotiations. My understanding is that there is going to be what we call a geofence, which is basically a virtual perimeter around the airport that is going to track every time a Lyft driver is making a pickup from the airport, and those records are going to be used. It's similar to the believe it's called I forget what the transponder is currently called. There's an acronym for it that escapes me right now, but it's a similar concept to that will be used to determine the accurate amount of fees to be paid for airport services.
So if I wanted to be one of your drivers and could pass all your requirements for my personal vehicle, then I'd have to obtain a device to go in my vehicle that would trigger that?
No, sir. The way it works right now is that everything is done based on the smartphone. So as a driver, your smartphone is where you get the ride requests. It tells you where to go via GPS, and it's how Lyft and Uber is able to actually track the vehicles. And by using that technology, and then by using a geofence again, which is basically taking certain coordinates, so that it basically pings every time that a vehicle crosses a line into those coordinates. So the smartphone is essentially now the transponder.
So then do you have a way to track that my smartphone is always on then?
We can't track if your smartphone is always on, but
So what is to ensure that the airport, that an Uber or Lyft driver is not going on property without the cell phone on to trigger that ping and make that count to hold you accountable for that fee?
Because you can't get a ride except through the cell phone, so the cell phone would have to be on to actually get the ride.
But once the ride's accepted and I'm going to the airport to pick the ride up,
as long as the ride is accepted within the airport grounds, let me back up.
Okay.
So you have to have the cell phone on, the smartphone on to accept the ride. That's the very first thing.
Right.
Any ride that is accepted, requested or accepted in airport grounds is going to be registered because the cell phone has to be on. So even let's say theoretically, if I'm a driver, I get a ride request at BNA Airport, and let's say somehow my cell phone runs out of batteries right after I've gotten the request, that record has already still been generated, so it knows that we picked up a passenger at BNA Airport and that fee will be counted.
Okay.
Yes, and it's also going to track, and this gentleman raises a good point as well, that it's also going to track on the customer side. The customer has their own smartphone, and it'll also track the request from that side as well. So there's kind of a duality of ability to track the request.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Councilman Claiborne, we have several councilmen who are on and for questions, so we're going to go ahead and take some more of those right now. Councilor Allen.
Thank you. I have two questions, one for Billy. Can you explain minimum fees and how those apply to all the different types of passenger for hire now?
Presently, the minimum fee in the livery service is 3 times the flag drop of a taxi cab. In Nashville, that would make it $9. What we're proposing is to take that language out of the ordinance, would allow the commission to establish a minimum fee by rule and then come to the Metro Council for approval by resolution. So there's not a stated minimum rate in the bill as we're proposing.
That's why I couldn't find it. Okay, thank you. And then I had a second question for Uber. It seems like everything you handed us talks about Uber X, and I've heard about Uber X and Uber. So do all the insurance and background checks apply to the Uber as well as the Uber X, and can you explain the difference?
Great question. Thank you for asking. So the reason that most of this is focused on Uber X and our ride-sharing model, which is the business model that is used on our Uber X platform, is because these proposed rules explicitly address Uber X and ride sharing. There's another option on the app that's called Uber Black, which is a more premium option. It's black on black livery cars, town cars, Suburbans, things like that, that are typically professional, and in Nashville are always professional transportation companies. And those companies in that business model procure their own insurance, also $1 million in commercial liability insurance. However, it's a different business model that's addressed in the livery regulations.
Thank you. Budget Chair Pridemore. Oh, okay.
Okay. I have a question about the insurance. On this form you've got here that's personal, auto coverage, and then commercial. So when they turn their app on, it's your umbrella insurance, but otherwise it's their own personal insurance, right?
Correct. Most of the drivers who operate on the UberX platform are private citizens, so stay-at-home parents who turn the app on to make some money while their kids are at school, or musicians who move to Nashville for their big break but need some way to support their music career, and so they, when they have some spare time, they turn on their app and make money by driving. And so when the app isn't on, the assumption is that they're in their own private car, driving around, perhaps to and from a music audition, or picking their kids up from school. And in those instances, they're not conducting commercial activity, they're just a private citizen with their own personal insurance. Now, in order to be on the system, we need to have their own personal insurance on file, a valid certificate of insurance to show that when the app is off, they are fully insured. But when the app is off, they are not participating in any sort of commercial activity, and therefore they're just a private citizen driving their kids to school or going to an audition, and therefore their personal insurance would apply.
Okay. And one more question in regards to the airport. So if I wanted to go to the airport and I call right now, I go to the app and say I want to be picked up, somewhere at a certain time and be dropped off at the airport. I turn my phone off and I'm done. I get in the car and y'all take me to the airport and they don't have their phone on. How's the airport going to know that that was actually a Lyft drop?
Yeah, so in all of the rides that take place, 100% of rides that take place on the Uber system and on the Lyft system are done on demand. And so you can't pre-schedule, say, you have a flight in 4 hours, you'd like a car to show up in 2 hours. You would not be able to use the Uber app or the Lyft app for those purposes.
Okay.
But what those apps are used for is, I'm leaving, I'd like to leave my house in about 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes. I'd turn my app on, I can see the ETA of the nearest drivers on either the Lyft or the Uber platform, and I see, a driver is 5 minutes away, tap my app, and that request is sent to that driver. If they accept the trip, then they see your address and they come and get you right away and bring you to the airport. Now, the apps have to be on, as my colleague from Lyft described, the apps have to be on for that transaction to take place. If at any moment you ended that ride on either the rider or the driver side, that transaction would end. However, both parties are incented to keep that trip running, and do keep the trip running, because that's how drivers get paid, and that's how the transaction takes place. So any time that a ride is taking place, both the rider and the driver have their apps on, which is sending data to our servers, collecting GPS data about where the rider and the driver are at those moments. And that allows us to send a signal anytime that they cross that kind of virtual perimeter that Joe's describing, and share that data with the airport so that they have full visibility into the trips that are taking place to and from. Now, if the app were off, say I were going to pick up my husband at the airport, I'm not participating in commercial activity, I'm just going to pick up my husband, that would not be considered an Uber trip, and therefore my app wouldn't be on and it wouldn't ping the GPS and it wouldn't be transmitted to the airport. But anytime a trip is taking place, that GPS data is fed to our servers and that data is shared with the airport.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I see Councilman Potts' light on, but I see someone else in his. So, Councilman Bindi.
I didn't want to give my back to the Uber and Lyft people. I didn't want them to get the wrong impression. My question is, were the taxi drivers invited to this meeting today? Were the cab companies invited?
They were aware of it. I met a couple of, I've actually talked with them about it. It wasn't a meeting I actually established, so I didn't send out mass invitations, but it was publicly noticed and the media was aware of it and that sort of thing. So I spoke to one of the companies today and asked if he was coming. He said he was not, so.
Okay. Well, my concern about Uber and Lyft has been with what happened with the small business owner that own a small cab company, and I decided to be open-minded and see if these new companies can reach out to our local businesses and find some kind of an agreement. So I'm going to wait to see what happens in that term and make my decision at that point. But I'm strongly encouraging both companies to reach out to our local businesses. We really need to make sure that as we grow as a city, we don't leave any businesses behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Scott Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got a quick question, and is it both your companies or just one where when, let's say, I call for an Uber or a Lyft, that the driver knows because my cell phone, I have an account that's set up and my picture comes up? Which company? Is that both or just all?
Thank you for the question. That's how the Lyft ride works. And maybe based on the prior question, I should just give a 30-second overview of kind of a simple idea of what it would look like from your perspective if you were requesting a ride, if that would be helpful. So you would sign up, you would have input your credit card with the app, and you take a picture so that the driver knows who to look for. If you request a ride, and I'm the driver who gets the ride request, I will know, but based on GPS, where you are, and I'll have a picture of you so I know who to look for when I get to that location. On your end, you would see a picture of me, you would see a picture of my vehicle, and then you would also have my license plate number, so you would know who to look for, which vehicle was coming to pick you up, and be able to confirm that I was, in fact, the driver on the Lyft platform. You would also be able to track my approach via GPS, because on your phone it's going to show a map of where you are, it's going to show where I am, and give you an idea of my route on my way to picking you up.
And the driver can choose to accept or not accept that trip, correct?
The driver can always choose to reject a trip, but if I can anticipate perhaps the question that you're asking, the driver does not know the identity of the person requesting the ride until after the ride has been accepted.
Okay, that's what I thought. So a driver is not supposed to, when they get there to the destination, they're not supposed to drive off, right?
Correct.
So if they drive off, that's a violation, correct?
Correct. And if that were to happen, again, there would be a record of it. There would be an easy way for any person to submit a complaint about that, and we'd be able to very quickly verify if that in fact did happen. That speaks to the transparency and the accountability that I mentioned before in describing how the Lyft platform works.
Gotcha. Reason why, kind of speaking to that fact, me and my wife do have the app on our phones, and and we were having a discussion earlier, my colleagues, picture, not picture, and things. Friday evening, we called for the car service just to give it a chance, and when I did it, the driver just drove right past me. Now, maybe it's the first time. Maybe we were out of, maybe it was a coincidence. But the second time it happened, I had my wife, who's much better looking than me in a different color than I am, do it, and she got picked up right away. And I don't think it's your company's fault, but I think it might be, I don't know what kind of training the Uber or Lyft drivers have, for this. But I know when I go to a hotel or I'm leaving a taxi cab, I got to go to the stand, and there's a line, and that cab driver cannot refuse to take me to my destination. And I think it's a great program. I voted for the program, and I just think in the future you need to get some, not just diversity training, but training for gender, because I've seen some people not want to pick up men or women for some odd reasons. I mean it happens, and that's one thing I would like to encourage, some sort of, I don't know, they probably sign a policy with you that they won't discriminate, don't they?
Yes.
Okay. There may be something, and I did report that, because it wasn't the fault of the company, but, sometimes that does happen, and thank you for addressing that. And I was told earlier that you guys are paying the airport fee and the fee to the city.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And, and I'm sorry, if I may, I'd be happy to discuss the incident that you reported and begin an investigation into that. I'd be more than happy to just speak to you in more detail about that after this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilman. Councilman Dominy, you're recognized.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. There was a question asked earlier, and it was pointed out that this legislation specifically addresses UberX. And when the question was posed, that you mentioned UberX and you mentioned Uber Black, but there was no discussion of Uber. I am unfamiliar with the difference. If I can get that clarified, that would be great.
Sure, by all means. So Uber is the company that creates the software. On the Uber software, we have a few different options for different types of rides that you can request. One is UberX, which is the low-cost, fuel-efficient cars driven by private citizens with their personal cars, where they're covered with an Uber umbrella policy when they're operating on that platform. And then another option within the app is the Uber Black option, which is the black town car, black suburban option, and that's a premium option. Each of the options within the app that you can request a ride are dubbed Uber blank. So UberX, Uber Black. Again, Uber is the umbrella company that creates the software and creates this kind of platform, and then the different product lines have kind of variations on that theme name.
All right, so the legislation, if it specifically addresses UberX, but the general passenger would be using that particular program as opposed to the Uber Black, is there something, what I don't want to do is create a legislation that only addresses one area and it leaves others open.
674 that we've proposed to make change to actually deals with all things livery except taxi cabs. Taxi cabs are not included in this. Anything that's for hire passenger vehicle will be covered. If she's talking about UberX and Uber Black. Uber Black has been operating in Nashville for months. They use existing companies that are already licensed by the commission. They're following exactly what the commission requires. UberX and Lyft is a different kind of program. That's where we've identified them as transportation network companies. But in general, they're all covered by the same ordinance and they're following the same rules. Again, there are a few nuances, specifically insurance, that deals more with the transportation network companies. It's actually requiring a different level of insurance than we currently have. So they're all covered. The only thing that's not covered that's for hire passenger vehicles is taxi cabs, and taxi cabs is covered in 6.72. And I would add any of the things that we're looking at here for on the 674 ordinance, we're gonna probably be coming back and talking with y'all about 672 and making some changes there as well.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Glover.
Actually, a couple of questions. I'd like to go back to the insurance piece specifically. Mr. Chair, do you want me to address to the companies or to you? I guess, because Lyft or Uber, either one, I guess you can answer this. The concern that I kind of have is the available but not on a trip piece of this. When they turn the app on, it's my understanding that the contingent insurance would then kick in to play if the personal doesn't pay. Well, most insurance companies are going to say, "Oh, you clicked on the app, you're now working." Have you had any experience in that?
Yes, so the way personal insurance auto policies are currently drafted, they actually vary a lot in terms of the type of exclusion that you describe. Some are very general and say that no commercial activity shall take place. Some are very specific and say that define commercial activity as actually having a passenger in the car, which clearly this period that we're discussing would not entail because there's no one in the car. Anecdotally, our experience has been that claims in this period have frequently been covered by personal lines insurers, but in the event that they have not, our policies are designed to step in the place of that personal policy and provide coverage from the very first dollar and basically act as a primary coverage from that point up to the amount of $50,000/$100,000/$25,000. So it's our opinion, and I'm sure it's Uber's opinion, that the entire ride process is fully covered. But yes, that first period is handled a little bit differently than the period from when the ride has been accepted through the actual ride itself.
Okay. And the next question I have is kind of twofold. It involves the insurance piece, but it also involves the person who hits the app that's at the airport and says, hey, I want to go to the hotel, or I want to go to wherever it is that I'm staying in Nashville. And they say, I'm flying back out tomorrow. Can you pick me back up? What safeguards are there for the consumer to where that driver doesn't say, I'm fine, I can pick you back up at 2 o'clock. They don't have to turn on the app. And this happens with cabs, and so I have to believe that it can happen with your drivers as well. In that situation, you probably aren't going to have the insurance coverage if the app's not on. And so what safeguards are in place with your companies to protect the consumer if they get into a car and the app's not turned on?
That's a great question. So that is very strictly forbidden from both of our companies' perspectives. It's mentioned very clearly in the terms of service, both on the passenger side and on the driver's side. It's grounds for immediate dismissal from the platform, again, either as a passenger or as a driver, if word of that does get back to the company. So it is, aside from abiding by the zero tolerance drug and alcohol policy, that's probably the most significant policy that we have, and it's grounds for immediate termination. We make that very clear to all those participating on the Lyft platform.
Okay, thank you. And just one final question for you, Billy. When you're looking at the legislation with regards to the charges, the taxi cabs, what I'll call the taxi cabs, the livery, and these personal networks or whatever, how close are you going to try to get the fees of all of them involved? Or, is there going to be a definite separation like there was with the livery firms, or is there going to be more of a closeness between the cabs and these networks?
Our intention.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Our intention would be, assuming that you were passed the ordinance as is, it come back to public hearing at the commission. We'd invite everyone in at the public hearing to debate what that should be. Once we did that, it would come back. It'd come back up to the council for it be only a resolution, but you'd still have the full debate to determine if we've suggested a fair price. So I don't know what that price would be today.
Thank you. Councilman Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Billy, just to review, currently there is no public regulation of Uber and Lyft in Nashville, Tennessee, is there?
Correct.
And so we are relying on their company policies, which are okay, but in terms of this government's interest in public safety, in this, at the current time, we've now been 9 or 10 months of their operation without anything. Correct?
The police have actually enforced and given out several tickets on that. From my commission standpoint, we did not have authority over it, but the police actually have issued some.
Okay, I guess my point is, my suspicion, without putting words in their mouth, is the reason there are no taxi cab companies is despite whatever the issues are about competition between them, even taxi cabs believe, as I think most of us do, that there needs to be public regulation in the interest of public safety for all of this, and at the very least, as we're thinking about all the subsidiary issues, it doesn't negate the fact that this is very important from a public safety perspective, beyond the good intentions of the companies for this operation in Nashville. And I hope we keep that in mind. I'm certain this is not the last word on the subject, but certainly once we pass this legislation, it will be safer for more people in Nashville than it is today.
Thank you, Councilman Stein. Very well stated. And we see that we have one more, and that's Councilman Claiborne. He has a follow-up question, and after that, I don't see anyone else, but we'll take comments from the vice. Councilor Moore. Okay, I'm sorry. This would be Councilman Claiborne.
Okay. I just had one other question and a comment for Mr. Fields. And this kind of goes back to the question that Councilman Stein made. When we get to the place where you're bringing legislation forward, can you tell us that you think there will be parity between these two companies and the taxi services?
I think initially there will not be because it's two different ordinances. I believe that once we get this through the council, what we'll do is come back with more additional legislation to deal with the other. I'm reluctant to try to come forth with anything with taxi cabs until you've dealt with this particular issue. But I think once that happens, I think there'll be fairness among the industries.
Well, from my standpoint, we have been allowing these two companies to operate illegally for at least 9 months, 9 to 10 months. So we've set a double standard between these two companies and cab drivers who have been serving this company for years, cab companies. They have to jump through hoops sometimes to operate properly and legally. And in order for me to support any legislation that addresses these two entities, we're going to have to make sure that we're treating the cab companies fairly. It is just not right to say to an existing company, you have to abide by all the rules, and to allow the same kind of company to move in on the opposite corner and say, we're going to give you free rein to do what you want to do, and we're going to make up the rules later on, and maybe we'll come up with the same set of rules, and maybe we won't. That's not acceptable to me.
Well, Council, what I can tell you, the TNC is not regulated in the city, so the violations would not have been at the company level, it would have been at the driver level. But what I could tell you is that for 28 years that I've worked in the government, my commitment has always been to serve the city as best I could. What I've promised to the cab drivers, and I'll continue, and to the cab companies, is we're going to be fair. I don't know that I can make it the same. In fact, some of the things we're doing for the TNCs and the livery services, I've actually talked to the cab companies about, and they've absolutely refused. They said, we do not want that. Some things they want, some things they don't. So we're going to have conversations with them to see what really makes sense for them. For instance, the idea of self-reporting for some of the cab companies is very foreign to what they do. That is not their process, and they do not want to do that. But from the livery service standpoint, almost all of them have said that makes sense for us, and we want to do that. So in fact, they're going to be. I think there's some challenges out there, but our goal is to make it fair for everyone. This isn't about us propping up one company or propping up one industry. It's about trying to be protecting the public safety and being fair.
Council Lady Moore.
This is a quick question for the Uber individuals. We were just trying to pull it up over here, going through the motion, and we were just under Uber, and I guess we were just getting confused with the Uber Black and the Uber X, so just put it under Uber and you'll find everything that you need?
Yeah, if you go to the App Store on either an iPhone or an Android or a BlackBerry and just search for Uber, you will find a single app. It's a white icon with a black U, and that will bring up a single app that allows you to request any different product on our platform. And in Nashville, we have Uber Black, the premium option, we have Uber X, and then we actually have Uber XL, which is the Uber X business model with slightly larger vehicles, such as a minivan or a 7-seat kind of crossover vehicle.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Council Lady. We have Council Lady Blaylock once again, and then Councilman Stein.
So my main thing is, I guess, the insurance. I want to make sure that the taxi cabs and these folks have the same bodily injury insurance coverage. Is that what we're looking toward to doing?
Well, again, it's two different. At the present time, taxi cabs, we require 150 for taxi cabs. In March, it's going to 100, 350. What's being proposed on the TNCs is they're going to have, again, as they've explained. We've also, in this ordinance, reserved the right for the commission to consider what those levels should be for the other vehicles. So what we may be able to do for livery, for instance, we may treat the livery cars very much like taxi cabs. For instance, a company that owns 3 Lincoln MKXs, for instance, are relatively small cars. They might be covered under a different level versus what the others are.
Thank you. Councilman Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a difference between being illegal and being unregulated. We've got folks downtown Nashville that are in vehicles right now that aren't regulated. It doesn't make them illegal, and that's just not the right term. And we also need to acknowledge that both of the companies are here in support of being regulated. So, I mean, it's an unfair rap to imply that somehow there's an illegal activity that's been going on under any form or fashion. We just the government's just hadn't gotten around to regulating them yet because they are so new. But indeed, they are to be commended for wanting to come under our regulations.
Thank you. I don't see any more lights lit up at this time, and so at this time, I will see whether or not the Chair of Budget and Finance has any comments.
I think it was all covered very well.
All right, good. Well, then, if that being the case, no other comments or questions, we are dismissed. Thank you very much for your time.